the Vietnam War came along, and he was in one of the Marine recon things, and he was did a lot of stuff behind lines, and he got really messed up with the PTSD and the thing, I mean, Vietnam was I watched this as a child, really, and as a young teenager, and I was quite fascinated because it was crazy. You talk about vets who are 1 minute they're out in the jungle, and 24 hours later they're in New York City. After and just that kind of contrast, and they go crazy. You've done the same through the Marines commando thing like that. It's a very testing.
That was something in my life. Was it tough? Yeah, it was like a 7 out of 10 tough. Duncan, I don't know whether to say how are you or how, or is that a bit cheesy?
Will be a bit cheesy, Chris. I've had people doing that in pubs for a long time, mate.
Got you.
And the old,
Yes, there was actually a funny joke about a big chief on a reservation, and apparently this guy knew everything. So one of the tourists rocks up on a tour bus and queues up to see the big chief, and he says, all right then, chief, if you're so clever, what did I have for breakfast? And the chief, without batting an eyelid, said, eggs. Let me know. The tourist is like, whoa. So goes away, comes back the next year. He's getting all cocky. He's like, right, look, come on, lads. Look, the big chief here, he knows everything. Yeah, friend of mine. Walks up to him and he says, how? The big chief says, fried. There we go. I probably insulted all the indigenous American culture there in one go, but hey ho. We still got a bit of freedom of speech, have we not?
No, absolutely.
Yes. So, yes, joking aside, Duncan contacted me, friends, sent me an email, and there was such fascinating stuff in it, all about the topics which I really find the most gratifying in life, which is esoterics, really, the hidden knowledge, the stuff they hide from you your whole life. And then people end up wondering why they're unfulfilled and they haven't fulfilled their goals, and perhaps their relationships are not working, or they're unhappy at work, etc., etc., etc. And as I found out over the years, there's no need to be, because you can heal everything, and unlike our health system in the Western world, you heal it within. It's very tempting, isn't it, when we're unwell or we're not happy, we always think we got to go to other people and they're going to fix us. But of course, even if they do that, it's generally a quick fix. It's usually with some sort of medicine that has possibly awful side effects. And there's conflict of interest there, as we've seen from the last 3 years, when you start letting trillionaire pharmaceutical companies into your life, and there's lots and lots of money involved. I think it all goes very, very, very wrong. So, Duncan, welcome to the show. Psychotherapist to natural healer. What can you tell us? What was there a conflict there?
Not so much a conflict, Chris. I was someone who, from being an adolescent, was looking for something, and it started with reading, and then I got older, and in my early 30s, I started doing a psychotherapy training, and then I went to a one-day workshop on the medicine wheel, and I just realized in that workshop that I'd actually found what I was looking for. It just became really obvious to me. And I started getting involved. And very quickly, I realized that the kind of indigenous Native American take on a lot of things was in my view, far superior to the stuff I was learning in psychotherapy. They had a kind of different view of what a human being was, and their strategies and other things for helping human beings just seemed really, really powerful. And when I look back, really, what I think is that our forms of psychology is very much the ego looking at the ego, and it's all very well, but the view from the First Nation people in the Americas, they just have a different way of looking at human beings, which connects human beings to everything that exists, and it's not just this isolated human focus by humans. And also the spiritual aspect, which is really such a strong catalyst. And it was really interesting because I'm someone I don't have spirit guides and people nattering in my ear all the time. What happens with me, I get very, I'm probably pretty stupid, and spirit like tells me directly. But I ended up going to a workshop with this guy called Harley Swift here in 1987. And I came back to start my third year of psychotherapy training. And I just realized that I just didn't want to be there anymore, that this stuff was so more exciting. And I smoked at the time. I went outside for a cigarette, and I was sitting thinking about this, really whether I wanted to be here. And suddenly these pigeons exploded off a roof and a feather spiraled down into my lap. And it was like, I just went inside and talked to the person and said, "Look, I can't do this anymore. I found something else." And she was really fine about it. She was someone who was trying to connect spirituality to transactional analysis and Gestalt, but didn't really find it. And and so I started a kind of journey, and I was all in, really. I was very enthusiastic and very, very quickly got involved and learnt my stuff. And within 2 years, I was able to run sweat lodges. I carried a medicine pipe, and I started teaching and doing stuff on behalf of this organisation, the Deer Tribe, which was a kind of multi-ethnic group. A lot of Native American Indians don't like Swift here because he teaches openly to Western people and things, but and he had like a different take, and a lot of people say he wasn't traditional, and I think that's true. I think he used what he had learnt because he was mixed blood, and really started to translate it into a Western idiom that was suitable for Western people. And certainly from my point of view, this through following this path, it's helped me a lot to overcome my own problems in life, and strip my ego down and understand that, and also put myself in a position where I can help other people.
He sounds a bit like the Bruce Lee of the medicine world.
Yeah, sure. And he was an interesting man. He was actually a world martial art champion in Aikido. He's actually in the, he's got a waxwork in the Martial Arts Museum, and he was a Vietnam vet, which is interesting, especially in terms of what happened with me later.
We'll come on and talk about that. I did chuckle. I wrote a couple of notes down here from your email. When I write psychotherapist, if you're a sign writer, you've got to be very careful, right?
Yeah.
Not
Psycho the rapist. Yeah. So, let me show off the knowledge I've learned then, Duncan, because I blimmin' love it, mate. I love it. When I'm in the sauna in the morning, I love listening to esoterics. It's very relaxing, but it's also so educational. I'm guessing that the indigenous Indian community, who always talk about the Great Spirit, don't they? I reckon they would heal people from the perspective that if everything's energy and we're energy, then you got to bring that back into resonance or harmony. And that if there's if there's something wrong with somebody, something is blocking that energy or challenging it. That could be, for example, substance misuse.
it could be bad thinking, couldn't it? It could be even, they say, physical ailments can often be a representation of something deeper that's wrong.
Oh, yes.
Whereas Western medicine is, rather than see the big picture, the holistic picture that everything's in, they try and treat you like a car in the garage, don't they? A car in the mechanical garage, and you know, they separate you from environment.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and this is it's a big thing in our way of thinking. We have a very rational, materialist kind of Cartesian model where they take things apart and look at all the bits. Whereas in the indigenous world, they're looking for the connections and, what brings things together and how different systems integrate themselves and find harmony. And it's very much about, as you say, energy. And I mean, you talked about the Western model. A friend of mine, David Wendelbury, who was out in the Americas before me in the early 80s, he worked with a healer called Bearheart. And he says he was working with him and a woman turned up for a cancer healing. And the first thing he did was sat her on the floor in the desert and drew a circle. And then he drew a line through the circle. He says, now, this is your job and this is mine. And in our world, we just go and see a doctor and we expect the doctor to heal us without any kind of personal effort or self-reflection or anything really. And it's a very different way of looking at things. And it's also very much about balance. So if you take the basic medicine wheel, as it applies to us, we have emotions, mind, spirit, and the physical. And the center is balance. And really, it's so beautifully simple. If you're suffering from something, if you look at that wheel, very often we're out of balance. So in our world, very often we spend loads of time in the mind. We might be, really into physical stuff, but especially for men, emotions is like a no-go area, and most people don't even know what that really means and what they feel. And spirit is something which is, most people don't actually understand, and they confuse it with religion and other things, but it's a very different type of energy.
Yes. I did some work with a lot of veterans back along, and because I get it, quote unquote, I get it now. I have spent my whole life not getting it. There's still a lot more that I'm gonna get, but I know, sure. I know what's going on the planet now. It became very problematic working with other veterans, trying to it's nigh on impossible unless somebody wants to learn how to explain energy, vibration, and frequency. If you want results in life, whether that be your health, your prospects, your family happiness, taking down the cabal, that it actually starts with you rather than projecting this onto other people or other sort of groups. And like you say, you go, oh, stop with that religious stuff. And you're like, it's like literally chemicals. If you want to say stop with that chemical stuff, yeah, it's all about chemical reactions. It's nothing to do with religion, like literally nothing to do. Certainly not organized religion. So what was
absolutely.
How did your journey progress then? So you were in the kind of the Western model. You had this moment, the synchronicity of a feather. You can often get some synchronicity, can't you, that many people believe is almost a sign that yes, keep going in this direction. And did this lead you straight to this Native American gentleman?
It really confirmed my thinking at the time. And so I left the psychotherapy training and I apprenticed to this organization called the Deer Tribe. And And I was just really keen, Chris. I put a lot of effort into understanding. I'd been to the workshop. We had a mail list, and I contacted lots of people and chatted to them to find out like their take on what we'd heard, because I think we all hear different things. We all have our own particular focus. So I did that, and then joined the apprentice group, and I was just so hungry. And the stuff I was hearing, I knew I was hearing it for the first time, but it felt like I knew it really deep down. I hesitate to say past life and that kind of stuff, but there was a resonance with this stuff inside me where I just knew what I was hearing, and it just made so much sense, and in a way it recalibrated my whole way of thinking. So the medicine wheels work in circles, and our world is very linear. So if you go to university, you're in this department, and this department doesn't, ecology never talks to physics, and that's a real problem in our world. Whereas the medicine wheel view is totally holistic in the sense that the circle contains everything, and you can't go separating out an individual element and doing it. And that's what we do in our world, and that's why we've got plastic and pollution and God knows what else happening, because they don't take account of whole systems. They just focus on the separate entities, whereas the medicine wheel teachings focus on everything, but they break down the circle into very specific sections. So my journey was about learning, and within 2 years or so, I had qualified as a sweat lodge leader and a pipe carrier, and I moved up to Wales, and I became a lodge leader for this organisation. So I started taking on apprentices far too early, actually, for in the long run of things. I feel after 35 years, I'm just beginning to start really understanding at some depth what I'm doing, and also becoming, I'm getting on in life now, and I feel becoming an elder has been very important for me to, I think you just understand things as you get older. Once you're past 50 and 60, there's some things that were very important to me that don't really matter in my life so much now, and you just get a very mature focus and insight and experience of life. When you live a long time, you see a lot of things, and so that's helped me a lot. And as I say, I just got absolutely involved, and I was keen, and I have been out to America, but a lot of my training was in Britain, because Swiftier, he only came once to visit, but he used to go to Switzerland once a year for a month, and I just used to save all my money and go there and stay for a month, and it was like 4 workshops, but lots of stuff going on in between. It would be like 5-day workshops with other days, and I was just so hungry to learn, and I just gradually started building my knowledge, and hopefully started stepping into some wisdom after a time.
Let's chat about these workshops, but I just want to give another example for our friends at home so they see how this works and how we're being let down. So when I was a substance misuse specialist, I kind of am, because it's the area I probably know the best in life, hands-on experience and all that. But so we used to do a lot of child protection, unfortunately.
Sure.
It was awful. And when a child is at risk, basically because their parents are so in the grip of addiction that they can't look after themselves, let alone adequately parent. And I'm not blaming the parents here, right? Because
no, sure. Well, addiction's there's the main theme, isn't it? It's getting a fix.
It's awful, and there's not enough understanding of this area. But so we would have these what we call core groups, and the idea of a core group is in the best interest to protect this child, and from experiences like, for example, I think the Victoria Climbier case, where it kind of like the social worker wasn't talking to the teacher wasn't talking to the local police woman, the local police woman wasn't talking to the the GP or the youth and this
I've worked in juvenile justice and social services, the care system, and I absolutely understand, Chris.
Yeah, so that
things have changed a little bit, but and there is more kind of interagency cooperation, but look, it still happens.
Yeah, well, it is tokenistically, and again, I think Baby P was another example where people weren't quite talking to. So I would rock up these core groups where all the professionals involved in this child's life should turn up, give their report for the past, these were held sometimes every month. There were sort of bigger ones held every 3 months or whatever the case was. But anyway, doctor, would they rock up? You're having a laugh. They're too busy in their clinic, giving their patients their 6 minutes of time and taking their 150 grand a year. Police, would the police rock up? No, I don't think I ever saw a police, Oh, will the police lock the person up when they've caught them, I don't know, sex working, or oh yeah, they'll be the first to lock up your client. Yeah. My point is just such a fractured system where the left hand doesn't even know what the right hand is doing, but even if they did, they wouldn't work with them anyway. How can a doctor who doesn't even know what's going on in this child life manage the parents' prescriptions of methadone or whatever? So I get it, Duncan. I completely get it. You say workshops, you mention pipe carrier and sweat lodge. Can you talk us through some of these healing processes?
Okay, well, the sweat lodges, the workshops. I still do run workshops. I've got a men's brotherhood workshop coming up in September. I started by doing it. I just really it was very interesting. I rocked up at a let's call it a new age event. It's not a word I particularly like, but it's a kind of coverall phrase. And I did a medicine wheel workshop, and I also do something called Five Rhythms Dance, which is an ecstatic dance thing with it's dance without steps really. And I got on very well. And from that one event, I got nearly 10 years of work, because what happened was, after the event, a couple of people come and said, look, I've got a little group of, spiritual group that I run of about 10, 15 people. Would you come along and do a weekend workshop? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And, from that workshop, people approached me, and really for a long time, I never advertised. I just got recommended to people. So in the workshops, I'd talk about the indigenous paradigm, the medicine wheel. There's lots of different topics within that, so I'd focus on particular aspects of the medicine wheel, that was like the teaching thing. Now the being a pipe carrier is the Native American pipe. I mean, a lot of people call it a peace pipe, but it's not. It's probably one of the best and most powerful ways of holding ceremony. The pipe represents all sorts of things, and it's a pipe where you put tobacco or herbs, nothing hallucinogenic or whatever. It's actually just a smoking herb, and it's a prayer ceremony really. So you call in the powers of the universe that work with the medicine wheel paradigm, and you do prayers, and the prayers go off into the smoke and then join with everything. And they're in the Native American tradition, they go, and the eagles take them to the Great Spirit, the great mystery, so that the prayers are heard. And it's a way of focusing and holding spiritual energy in a powerful way while you're doing ceremony. And the sweat lodge, which is, it's probably best described in a way as a spiritual sauna, but you build out of hazel or willows or flexible branches a small like bender like construction, not huge, but maybe 13 foot across diameter, and that is covered with blankets and tarpaulins. So inside it's really dark, and I don't work with the center pit, although many traditions do. I work with the northeast pit. So you have a fire outside. Rocks are heated, and you've got to be very careful which kind of rocks, because people try and do this and end up putting something like flint on a fire, and it's like a hand grenade going off. You hear horror stories of people who haven't actually trained properly, and people have actually died. There was somebody who's trying to be the first new age billionaire who killed several, I think it was 3 people in America, never trained, and I think he was using plastic, and I think he suffocated people, but I think he actually went to prison for for it. But as I say, the rocks are brought in, and you sit in the dark, and it's very similar to you do an invocation and evocation of the powers, and you do this by pouring water onto the stones, which creates steam, and this steam and heat goes around the lodge. But really, in a way, I mean, the heat is very tangible, but it's the energy that's there, and it's really because we're not as solid as we think. Actually, there's only about 0.99% of us is actually physically here according to modern day physics. So this energy is passing through your energy field and cleansing you, and there's rounds of prayers focused on different things. So I mean, there's all sorts of different sweat lodges, but the classic one would be the first round is the invocation, evocation, and then prayers for yourself. So you're praying for those things you want to come into your life, for healing, abundance, whatever it is you need. The second round might be prayers for other people, so you're praying for your relatives and the planet. The third one might be a round of gratitude or a giveaway, and the fourth round is in silence, and you just thank the powers and listen to the song the stones sing. But it's immensely powerful, and I mean, it's not about me because my job's just to hold the space. But within the sweat lodges, spirit speaks to people. I've had lots of people who have been drinkers that have gone into a sweat lodge, and really they've radically cut down their drinking or not drunk again because spirit has told them something, and it's so powerful and so meaningful that they walk away from that. And all sorts of things. And as I say, that's not my job to create that. My job is to actually just hold the space and also to keep it safe. And I've been running sweat lodges for getting on for 33 years now, and to my knowledge no one's ever been hurt. And I think that's so important spiritually. I hear lots of things about people who go to workshops and come away distraught and messed up, and really I think it's very important that we keep people safe and try and return them into the world at least in the same condition, if not better, through these processes.
I did a medicine ceremony recently. There's a lot of similarities with someone who's lived a party lifestyle and experimented with this, that, and the other over the years, but between that and doing a ceremony. In fact, to be honest, I think part of the problem in my mind is there was no real distinction for me, although the setting was beautiful, the people were beautiful, some of the stuff that we underwent was just incredible. When they put the tongs, the tuning tongs on your chest and just dong, and it goes through your whole body and makes you feel like $1 billion. It was just, but here's the thing. When I shut my eyes, oh my God, you don't want to know what I was seeing. It was, we're talking Amazonian stuff here, folks, for people that,
sure. I understand totally.
and every time I shut my eyes, I just had these hideous demon beings coming at me like this, literally, and it was like a kaleidoscope of almost like a real, almost like my own personal version of a Day of the Triffids. And then this would morph into visions and stuff I just didn't want to be seeing. It was bringing my loved ones into it and horrible things happening. And I don't know whether I needed to have that interpreted for me. I will say overall, I found it quite an interesting experience. And I did come away definitely feeling there was 3 areas of my life that, boom, come on, Chris, you got to. One of them I managed quite well, really. I'm quite pleased. But my point, Duncan, was had I been another veteran, possibly who's not as well-rounded and familiar with this, spiritual understanding, and someone who's, done a bit of this, that, and the other in there, I could have spun out big time, is what I'm trying to say.
We're confronted in this world today with lots of very powerful things like the South American substances you're talking about, which are incredibly powerful. And they come from traditions where people know how to hold that energy. And if you work with properly trained people from the traditions, to a large degree, they will see what's going on inside of you and stop some of that stuff. Obviously, they want you to, and these things are very powerful, and people get extremely pertinent messages. These substances have been used in alcoholism and really hardcore drug addiction, and it just speaks to that point where people can't avoid it anymore. It like tells them the truth, and that's really good. But I think there's a lot of people now running around in the world who are not really properly trained. They might get access to this stuff. Also, look, there's light and dark in all spiritual traditions to some degree, and not everything's beautiful light. There are some people whose motives and other things are quite different. And again, if you're just doing things for money, perhaps rather than pure spiritual integrity, one has to question really what are you doing in those areas. And I've come across lots of casualties where people have picked up entities and all sorts of stuff that I've had to work on to clear, almost like an exorcism in some cases, because people have picked this stuff up, they've not been properly protected, and they've been harmed by it, and it's like they've been opened up, and this stuff is they finish the ceremony and it's still happening. And as you say, with someone who has had those experience, say a veteran who's had experiences, if they're not protected properly and there's no real integrity in the ceremony, you're exposed to all sorts of stuff. And for sure, look, this stuff goes on in people's psyches anyway, this kind of repetition of events and trauma. But really, the job of people that are running good wholesome ceremonies is to protect people. And as I say, my job really isn't to create experiences for people. My job is to hold a space and keep the and I've been taught how to protect things like sweat lodges and ceremony and things like that. When I put people out on initiations, where they might spend a night in a circle in the dark in the forest or somewhere like that, we have levels of protection, and and I have a fairly good idea, not of the detail, but where that person is, and and it's my job to check in and if things start to go award, to send protection and other energetic forms there to help that person get through that experience. And as I say, that I don't want to criticize people, but I've heard some horror stories, particularly when it involves things like teacher plants, with people who clearly don't really know what they're doing. And a friend of mine went to a very big peyote ceremony, and he had worked with, again, somebody who had been president of the Native American Peyote Church, and this guy had said to him that if anybody gets sick in my ceremony, I'm doing something wrong. And he said he was in this large teepee with about 250 people, and he said it was just like sick bags all night long, and he said the atmosphere in there was terrible, and he said my prayers were, "Great Spirit, get me out of here."
It's a funny thing, actually. I was the only one that didn't throw up. That tells you tells you a bit about my substance misuse over the years.
Sure, but also, Chris, it's I've done the same kind of stuff, and I've had similar experience. I've done it quite a few times, and it's not really, teacher plants are not really my way. It's not like I don't get anything out of it, but compared to some people, I don't get the huge kind of thing that people get. But I've spoken to the people from the Amazon about that, and they say that one guy said, I see you've done lots, and I said not really, but I've done quite a lot of work on myself. And he said, yeah, I can see that, because otherwise you'd be with the pukers in the back row. So the fact that you didn't probably means you've actually cleared a lot of that psychic stuff that doesn't have to come out just on the physical level, which if you've got no idea of what's going on inside yourself, that's likely what's going to happen.
Yes, I wouldn't want to put it, because the two chaps I were with, they were having a blissful time to the point where, I certainly think they were thinking like, maybe we don't need to do this again. We're kind of there, certainly for the, this. And I don't want to sound like I'm sounding ungrateful. No, absolutely not. I'm just, sure. I'm just being honest. Am I glad I did it? Me, folks, I'm only talking for me here. I wouldn't recommend anyone else on this planet do anything, and I've never done that. But for me, yes, it was a very interesting experience. I really did feel that I needed to get in the pub and knock down 2 pints of lager, which I understand is not part of the,
no, sure.
but it I think it's because it kind of like these, when you have like a quote unquote bad trip, is basically you're in a severe form of shock, I think, and when you come out of it, you're a bit like, whoa. But yes, fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and the shaman was wonderful, really incredible person. You can say that put us all at ease, and clearly knew what they were doing. So this chap, the Native American, so what did he ever give much about his Vietnam experience away?
Oh yeah. He he was really messed up by Vietnam, and it was part of his healing journey. He was someone, look, some of these characters, people don't agree, they call them liars and stuff. But as far as I know, this guy was called Harley Swiftear. He was half Cherokee, half Irish, was brought up in Texas, because the Cherokee were moved from, the East Coast into Texas on the Trail of Tears. And actually, it wasn't just Native Americans. There was lots of Irish, Scots and Welsh and other people who had actually, if you imagine you come from the Irish potato famine and you walk into this community of people which are really different and healthy, they wanted to join in and be part of it. So, and Swiftear was he was a martial artist. He was a world champion, and the Vietnam War came along, and he was in one of the Marine Recon things, and he did a lot of stuff behind lines, and he got really messed up with the PTSD and the thing. Vietnam was I watched this as a child, really, and as a young teenager, and I was quite fascinated because it was crazy. You talk about vets who are 1 minute they're out in the jungle, and 24 hours later they're in New York City. And just that kind of contrast, and they go crazy because there's no normalization afterwards. People are just, you're a soldier one day and then you're back out on the street and you're expected to cope with that kind of thing. And he was very angry, and he was a lorry driver, and he stopped for lunch in a little hick town, and he saw this group of white guys abusing this Indian woman, and he stepped in and had a fight, hurt some of them badly. One of them was the son of the guy who pretty much ran the town, and he ended up in prison. And he got his teeth kicked out, gang rape, all sorts of stuff. And when he got out of there, he was in a real mess. And his story is really, when he was a child, he dreamed with this Native American guy from the Navajo tribe, and he remembered these dreams, and he went and found this guy, and this guy kind of helped him to come back through ceremony and other things. And then at one point he went out and started teaching, and I really liked him. He was a really interesting man, a very clever man, someone who, it wasn't just Native American spirituality. He was pretty good across lots of different things. He had gone to college and allegedly had PhDs and stuff like that. And what he was trying to do, which is, and I feel myself in a similar place, he was trying to translate these teachings into a form where Western people living in modern industrial societies could actually gain something. And I feel that, I'm almost translating the American into British and trying to make it appropriate to my culture. And it's that balance of absolutely ancient and absolutely modern. And also, I would say that I think some of these teachings have been held by Native Americans, but I think they come from lost civilizations a long time ago, and that they are something that's traveled through many different cultures. And I don't think people own spirituality. And the way I'm not working with, Lakota spirit entities and stuff, these are the things I work with, the spirits of this land. I might use a languaging and a structure to call them. And also I think that there's a lot of similarities that our Celtic ancestors were very, very similar to the Native American tribes, not in detail, but they probably had different symbol systems, but the way and the understanding and the foundation of their spirituality was probably very, very similar. And I think we're in a time where we need to regrow our own roots, because these things have been persecuted out of existence. Lots of people died. When the church established itself, and after Constantine, it was illegal to be a pagan. And you could be murdered. And, everybody says, oh, it was the good news of Jesus. Well, it actually wasn't, in my view. It was kings who were frightened of losing their power who converted to Christianity because they could be attacked by Christian armies. And then, they built churches on the old sacred sites, and people were gradually corralled, into religion. And, over hundreds of years, we've got the present day thing. And that, I'm not against Christianity, and I know some lovely Christian people, but the church is another entity completely. And we all know about, if you've looked around at the roots of that stuff and what it's really about, it's not about love, light, and joy. It's about something, it's more about financials and other stuff, really, and control.
Yes, you're preaching to the choir here, brother. Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, which means the anointed one. Anointed with what, you may ask? Anointed with the oil of gladness. It's an alchemical process, isn't it, within us, Duncan, that when we're firing,
absolutely,
when we're living a righteous spiritual lifestyle to the best of our ability, our body is a crystal, and it picks up the reception of the higher energy. And I can only speak for myself, but you literally buzz like I'm doing now, just sat here. That's the main takeaway from the word Christ. Of course, the church has completely taken that word in, created the story of a man around it. I believe the man was Yeshua. I don't think he died on a cross. I think that, again, that's all allegory, but it's fascinating. I mean, to go back to what you're saying about ancient civilizations and Native American, yes, they're absolutely right. And this is where Christianity's not being very honest. So let's just use the term Jesus. He's on the cross. And he has the 5 wounds, so the crown of thorns, the nails through his hands, nail through his feet. It's 4, and then the Roman centurion spikes him with the sword to make sure that he's truly dead, and then he goes to the Father. It's all allegory for stimulating like your hypothalamus, that you only do this and you only connect with universe, spirit, when you overcome your 5 senses. That's what the 5 wounds is about. Same with David and Goliath. Same with David and Goliath, isn't it? To overcome the big ego, that's your Goliath. David pings 5 pebbles at him, and the 5th one hits him here. Pineal gland, all-seeing eye, third eye, and it's all allegory for getting over this body and understanding this body doesn't really exist for the reasons Duncan said, that if we're like 0.01% of matter, the rest is just vibration and frequency. And the native cultures and the indigenous and the ancients, they clearly knew this, which is why they talk
sure.
about...
I mean, they one of the significant things with the Native American cultures is that they talk about this being a dream. And, it's another level of the dream you have at nighttime. And it's said this is a much more controlled dream with, very rigorous boundaries, so, at night you could walk through the wall, but, here you'd probably hurt yourself. And again, what happened with Christianity is that, my belief is it came from a lot of the teachings that were called, we used to call them Gnostics. And a lot of people think that the Gnostics became Christians. Actually, from what I've heard from educated people, it was more about the Gnostics actually criticized Christianity and called it a virus in the human psyche. And they were eliminated. The mystery schools were eliminated. And the first Christians, particularly the Christian fathers, were, they were very hardcore, and they were literalists. They saw everything as literal rather than the allegory, which had been the way things were taught in the past. And it all became very concretized, and as a result, lots of people have suffered. Lots of people were, burnt and killed and tortured, and the most horrendous things happening in the name of, a God of love, or
Yes.
or Jesus or whatever. And that, as I say, look, I know lots of really good Christian people. I would say that if you look at the history of the church, you will see another story, and they've never apologized. I mean, in the Americas, there's a guy called Stannard who wrote a book called I think it's American Genocide, and he puts the number of people killed in the Americas as 100 million people that died of plague, torture, starved to death, murdered, across North and South America, and it's huge, and it's not even mentioned.
Yeah, so we've got all the stuff in Canada, haven't we? With the orphanages and stuff,
God, yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
yes, here's the thing. It's all good 3-dimensional stuff, isn't it? It's the lowest form of vibration, and we don't need to defend ourselves. It just is. If you don't want the answers in life, join a religion, because they're not going to. They're literally, they're literally, their job is to not tell you, to keep you in the matrix, so that the psycho-trillionaire corporate psychopaths can further control you and further their their world order, so to speak. But Duncan, you work with Special Forces guy, and can you tell us a bit about that experience?
Well, yeah, it's part of the story, really, Chris. During the late 1990s, there was a lot of stuff coming out from radical and political Native Americans. There was an organization called AIM, which was the American Indian Movement. And, they were having a war on various reservations with the FBI and other things. It was getting really heavy. And they started criticizing people who were teaching white people. And, I really understand that, they had their land stolen, their culture was destroyed, pretty much everything about the old tribes had been completely destroyed, and they got angry because they were saying, look, you've done this and you're not going to take our spirituality. So they started criticizing even some of their own spiritual leaders, like Wallace Black Elk. He had his nose broken by them, and he was like, the Black Elk he was the 19th Black Elk in a lineage of Black Elks who was like the Lakota shaman. And also people like my teachers were heavily criticized, and I wasn't oblivious to this, and it started to get to me, and it got to a point where it started to affect my work, and eventually I went out onto the land, did a ceremony, and Spirit said, listen, you need to walk away for 5 years. And after that 5-year period, anything that's left is yours. And I'll tell you what, I mean, it was the last thing I wanted to hear. It was my ego, my identity, my money stream. I'd invested all this time. I'd walked away from really good employments, but it was such a strong message. I did that, and I had my hair cut. I went back into the system and worked for a probation charity, wrote a youth safety strategy for a West Midlands city, and ended up working for Connections, which is like the career service. And after the 5 years were over, I was quite relieved to get out of that system, because I didn't really enjoy it anymore. I was very capable, but I just didn't enjoy the work. And I put my pipe together and said, Great Spirit, I'm back. What's for me? And within 3 days, I got a phone call from a woman whose partner was suffering from PTSD quite badly. And I, to be honest, Chris, I didn't even know what PTSD was. But and I said, okay, look, I'll go out and I'll come and meet you and have a chat with you and see if there's anything I can do. And I met this guy, and he turned out to be he had been in the Paras and in the Falklands as a sniper, and then he joined the SAS and had done 8 years, and then he had a career as a mercenary when he was when he left the things, and he was trying to kill himself, really taking crazy missions, but he was someone who just kept coming back. And this guy was in a really bad way. He was suicidal. He was having daytime and nighttime hallucinations. And it was basically driving him crazy, and he was struggling to cope. And in talking to him, I realized that my grandfather had been in the Battle of Mons as a 16-year-old, facing huge odds and firing artillery pieces at German guards walking Prussian guards walking shoulder to shoulder, almost point blank range. And that was that was a huge thing, and he went pretty much through the First World War. And I remember as a kid, he'd wake up. I shared a room with him, and he'd wake up screaming. And my image of my grandfather is him sitting in the one-piece combination, vests and underpants and vest, crying, and his tears, actually I could hear his tears hitting the lino. And this was like years after the war. My father had been in the Navy and seconded for a short time into naval special forces in Africa, diving in, because he was trained as a Navy diver at one point when the midget submarines started attacking ships. And again, he would wake up on, fall asleep during a film on Saturday afternoon or Sunday or something, and wake up screaming. So I had experiences of this. I just didn't connect it with PTSD. So when I was talking to this guy, I just knew what to do. I know he needed a sweat lodge, and I needed to bury him, because this guy, he clearly wanted to die, really. But I use a form of shamanic burial with some people who suffer from PTSD. It depends on who they are and what's appropriate, and it isn't for some people. And I won't go into all the details, and because people might try this, and it's really, you've got to be very careful doing this kind of work. You do need to know what you're doing. But anyway, this guy came to me, we did a sweat lodge, and we got to know each other a bit. And I remember a very crucial point. He was smoking roll-ups, and he kept going outside for a roll-up, and I was talking to his partner, and she was saying, "This is amazing. He doesn't talk to people. He doesn't like people, and he's telling you things I haven't even heard from him." And then one point she said, "Be very, very careful. Don't touch him. He's really dangerous." And I remember after the sweat lodge, he was, I was saying goodbye to him, and I knew I just had to hug him. It was like that human, that human thing. And I was getting this dialogue going, and I hugged the guy, and it's really interesting. I still see this guy occasionally, and he's not a hugger, but he always hugs me. It's a big military bear hugging hug. But and anyway, so he came back, and because this guy had been working in Northern Ireland and living in holes, observing for long periods of time, I knew it wasn't just a one-day burial. So I did a 2-day shamanic burial with him, where he was not deep into the earth, but it's usually about knee height, so you're actually in the earth, because the earth actually has a power when you're into it to clear energy, because it's Grandmother Earth, she's huge compared to us, and she doesn't discriminate about good and bad with people. We're all her children, no matter what we do. And so I did this 2-day ceremony with him, and it was, to be honest, it was pretty scary, really. Once I'd opened my pipe and he was in there, I just realized what I was dealing with. And I had to go and see him every 12 hours. And it was, I used to have these kind of Rambo fantasies that he'd come out this brave with a sharp stick and finish me off, because it was clear sometimes he actually didn't know where he was. But I got through it, and when I got him out, he said that he nearly came out on the last night, and I asked him why, and he said, because I was just sick as a dog. He said, I was just puking everywhere. And then I remembered what you said about Grandmother Earth's come to cleanse and heal me, so I stayed in. And anyway, I gave him a plastic bag for his stuff, and then we went and did a sweat lodge to finish off. And he phoned me 2 days later, and he said, "Listen, mate, there was no puke." And I said, no, that was psychic puking. And what he was doing really was puking out all of this energy. Now, it turned out that this guy, he told me that he went to Combat Stress, which is, you're probably familiar with, which is the charity that deal with PTSD for the forces. And he said that he'd been tested, and they've been testing since 1916, and he had the highest ever score. I can't validate that, but I did have a chat with the chief psychiatrist at Combat Stress at one point, and she called it a miracle. She couldn't understand what I did, how I did it, but she said it was a miracle. She couldn't believe the change in this guy who couldn't even do group work, which he was now doing. His dreams and things of society, not cured, but he was so much better that he could actually cope with the everyday things which he found impossible. And interestingly, I said, well, I'd be very happy to come and do some work with you. And she said, no, you're far too alternative for us. And, after kind of sorting out one of their worst clients. And after this, I wrote an article in a kind of magazine, and I actually got quite a lot of work, not just with soldiers, but people suffering abuse. And what I've developed really is several methods of dealing with that. The shamanic burial is a very powerful one, but I work with people making fetishes where they over several days, they push all of these experiences or the energy of these things and go and bury this thing and then create, it's called a death doll, life doll ceremony. So you create a death doll, which you push all of the crap that you want to get rid of. And then you ceremonially bury this, and then you build a life doll, which is, redreaming your future. And I've developed several methods, and really, particularly because I get people come to me in the winter, and winter burials, I live up in Wales, you drown people. It's so wet. So there's, and sometimes it's emergency stuff. So and really what I've done is adapted ceremonies that I've done and initiations that I've done for that thing. And it's something, I just hit on it really. And so I'm very interested at the moment. Been working with a friend recently, and I'd like to do, we've actually applied to a couple of particularly special forces charities, and they're interested, but they say we've tried to apply to them to get funding so we can have psychiatry reports before and afterwards to show the difference and how this works. And currently I'm still looking for funding for running a trial for stuff like that. But it was amazing, and it shocked me, Chris, because I really hadn't done this kind of stuff, and before this I'd never really considered that I was a healer. I was a good teacher, I was a good ceremonialist, but a healer was something I kind of thought, no, I'm not really, that's not really what I'm doing. But after that I kind of had to own that a little bit, and what it made me realize was that because I'd helped someone like him, basically I could help the everyday average neurotic in our world, of which, that applies to all of us, in my view. I think we live in a culture that's quite sick, and we all need healing, everybody. And if you don't understand that, well, you've probably got a journey to take to discover that, because I think we're all affected by the nature of our culture, and it's coming to an end. This is a kind of end time. There is a new energy coming, and I'm into the Mayan calendar and things, and I've seen this coming for a long time, and most of what my teachers told me back in 1987 has come through a long time ago. So yeah, and it was a really transformative thing to me, and really, in many ways, it healed me, because to be honest, when I'd stopped working, I wasn't sure I was going to go back to this stuff. It was like, have I lost it? Really, is this for me anymore? And then this guy turning up, it was like really appropriate, and it gave me the confidence to work on my own without my teachers. And
did he?
This happened in.
Sorry, Dunk. Did he tell you much about his childhood trauma?
He had been in care, and there were various things that happened.
Boom! There you go.
And his father actually had been one of the original SAS, and was a very angry, messed up person as a result, and was quite violent and things in the family, and he suffered that from a child. And and as I say, I've worked with lots of people who have suffered childhood abuse, and the PTSD is as bad, and people take it different ways. Some people become dreadful victims, some people just get really angry and really violent, and I've met a whole spectrum of people that have taken that in different ways. But again, these things, whether you're military or whether you suffered abuse, are really powerful. And as I say, it's also not for everybody. There's some people, I think, maybe not a burial, and we'd have to go a bit more gently. But and the thing is, I'm interested in really powerful things that get to it and heal people quickly. I don't want to do therapy with someone for 10 years. I prefer to do a ceremony and then support them a bit afterwards, which is what I did with this guy. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm sorry, I asked you that question for a reason. It's we have a very delusional idea of what the military is, full stop, but also about veterans trauma. And I just know, because I've done this for quite a while now, and been traumatized myself as a kid.
I've heard your story, Chris. Yeah,
overwhelmingly, we're talking childhood trauma. They spin it. The military spins it into like you get this in combat. I'm not saying you can't get traumatized in combat, but it's a lot easier to relieve adult trauma because you can rationalize, whereas childhood trauma is deeply ingrained because it happened to you so young and you didn't have the ability to rationalize. And I think the military don't want to admit that many of us, if not a majority, we was damaged goods. That's why we joined up.
No, for sure. And look, it is that foundational level which then gets built on and built on and built on. And you probably say this yourself, that when you have an early childhood trauma, you tend to attract the same thing until you learn to sort it out.
Mm.
And some people become really tough, and the military is a draw. And if I'm quite interested in the SAS and things like that, and have been. I've never been in the military, but I've had an interest. I've read the books and that kind of stuff. And when you look at the history of a lot of these people, that's where they started. They may not talk about it deeply, but they're kind of saying that I didn't have a very happy childhood. Some people are very explicit, but and again, particularly with special forces, I think that those people, it appeals to them because they want to be really tough, but also these people can be focused and sent out because they have that energy, and a lot of it's really deeply rooted anger, which can be focused as violence and whatever, and becomes very clinical in lots of people. And it's I really admire special forces people and what they get up to, and just passing, we've all seen the training films and stuff like that. It's a really it's not certainly not for everybody, and it takes a certain sort of person to go through it. And like you've done the same through the Marines commando thing like that. It's a very testing regime, and again then when you're exposed to the extreme violence and traumas that happen in war, and I know with this guy it wasn't just what he did, it was what he'd seen, what happened to friends, and that whole thing, and it's like a layered cake. It just builds and builds and builds. And I say my way of working with it is not, we did talk about things, and in fact, really, I wish he had told me certain things, because they kind of stay with you, and that reality of war, and the really nasty side of things that he'd seen. But really, what I'm interested in is clearing the energy. When I work with people, I don't really want to know the details of their childhood trauma and abuse. I need to know what I'm working with. But really, I prefer people to go out and talk to a tree. And dismiss that stuff, and that's actually a very good way of doing it, because trees don't judge you, and you can be really honest. Whereas human beings, there's always that thing about judgment. And also, it happened in the in 1916 with people who were suffering from shell shock, that the psychiatrists actually got PTSD because they were listening to these horror stories all day long, and then they started dreaming about it.
Anyone can join the Marines. It's just if you want to, if that's your thing and you want to do it. Yes, it's true, a very small percentage actually get through compared to how many people go down the recruiting office. But that was something in my life. Was it tough? Yeah, it was like a 7 out of 10 tough. It's becoming a spiritual warrior, which is where the honor lies, you could say. When you stop taking,
yeah, sure. Look, I distinguish. The warrior is an interesting thing. I follow a kind of Toltec spirituality, which comes from the Mayans, and actually, my teachers say that they brought that energy into North America, and when they on some of their migrations. And the idea of the spiritual warrior is interesting, because a soldier is someone who fights physical wars. A warrior is someone who fights their own demons inside themselves.
Within, yeah,
and there's something we all need to do. And if you're not a warrior and you're dealing with tough stuff, it's very difficult. And you need to adopt the same kind of mindset, but it's turned inward rather than outwards.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so, okay, Duncan, just one final thing then. When you look around yourself in this world, there is an awful lot of negative stuff, ranging from the almost benign negative, like the fact that, I don't know, some people choose to have like a television in their house, scrolling Sky News all day long. That you can ignore that because that's in other people's houses, and you have a choice whether to go round there, don't you? But then you've got some much more hard hitting stuff, like, for example, people that think they can lock you in your house for a year, and experiment on your body and this kind of stuff, and then there's the World Economic Forum with their 15-minute cities and their human climate change and all this kind of stuff. And what I'm getting at is the list is endless, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The list is endless. Where do you start?
I'll just say, I think, first of all, we need to see what's happening in our world in context. And I'll say I'm someone who follows the Mayan and Aztec calendars and have for a long time. And what they say briefly is that every 6,625 years, the sun changes the nature of its energy. And the sun is the supreme God, Lord of this planet. It works with Grandmother Earth in lots of different ways, but when the sun changes its energy, it's like a magnet changing the nature of its field, and we're like iron filings. We just realign, and that is part of what's happening now. And I think that the reason we're getting this kind of acceleration of control and stuff like that is that the people who have been in charge of the world for a long time, and I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, and you can see the same bloodlines. Most of today's rulers are related to Constantine. It's the same families that have been in power in the world. These people are very, very worried because they know there's something coming that they can't control, so they're trying to shut things down. I don't think they're going to succeed, and in fact, actually, I think they're running scared. And when you look, and I'm so glad for myself that I can see that larger picture, because when you have that larger picture and you see what's going on, you're not running up face to face with all of these things and getting terrified. I see it as a bigger picture, and I truly believe it's going to change. And the way we change that is like you said, when you change yourself, the world changes. And I think that there's what I feel is happening is that we're going to go back into in the future, we'll come to a time when everybody will be connected to the collective consciousness, and we will just know what these people are up to. There won't be, it's not about watching videos. We will just understand. And I think, that understanding comes through the heart, which is far more powerful than our brain. It's got a much bigger magnetic field. And that's where we're going. And I think we need to be positive. Fear is, in the teachings I carry, fear is the first enemy of the human, and most people never escape it. A lot of the time you need to learn to face your own fears. A lot of the initiations of things I do, one of them is called Night on the Mountain of Fear, and you go out into a sealed medicine wheel overnight in the dark, in somewhere in nature, and you call and face your own fears. And what that does, when you come back in the morning, it gives your warrior a little foundation to stand on, because most people don't face their fears. They don't even know. They're in denial. I'm not scared. I used to be like that. I didn't think I was afraid of anything. And when I started looking at myself, I was actually afraid of everything, and tiny little things that you would think, it's like, Gulliver with the Lilliputians or whatever they were called, on their own, one thing, but there's thousands of them. They can just disable you. And I've been in that state for, the first part of my life, even though I thought I was tough and clever and everything like that. But actually, really, I was just reacting to life and fear all of the time. And, so, the idea of a warrior for me is that you're not in reaction. You see what's coming and you only take action. And it's not an easy thing to do, and a lot of it is what, you need to get hold of your fear and find out what that is, where it comes from, what you're actually afraid of, and to see the illusion of it, because fear is a phantom. It's not really real. And it's something you never really overcome. You just learn to walk through it.
Duncan, we'll put your a link for you below. So if people would like to support what you're doing, or they've got ideas to run by you, I'm sure there will be, because I get a lot of emails.
Certainly. At the moment, I'm in the process. I've got a website, but to be honest, it's I haven't touched it for years. I'm developing a new project called the School of Mirrors with my son, who wants to learn the medicine and work with me. He's very interested in working with PTSD as well. So my email address will be good.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
That's d.r.wordley@gmail.com.
Brilliant,
Chris. No, it's been wonderful, and
yes,
really nice to have someone who understands.
Yeah,
I don't have to do
well, like I say,
explanations and.
like I say, this is it's been a journey, and once you undertake that journey, it all becomes so obvious, doesn't it? It becomes so obvious. So, Duncan, stay on the line just so I can thank you properly. But massive thank you. Really, really enjoyed this chat. Friends at home,
likewise, Chris.
Thank you, mate. Friends at home, if you could chuck us a like, if you did like it, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the notification bell. A massive, massive thank you for those people who've been kind enough to become Patreons for $1.99 a month, or channel members for $1.99 a month, or who support us on Locals. Much, much love to you all. Thank you.